Good afternoon and welcome to CompanyRoots. Today we're interviewing Professor Tyler Wry, an associate professor of management at the Wharton School, who studies hybrid ventures, which are organizations that combine related but potentially contradictory aims in their core. Professor Wry specifically looks into how hybrids emerge and how they impact society.
Professor Wry has been quoted in the New York Times, Forbes, and The Atlantic, and has earned several Best Paper awards. It is a privilege, and we are truly honored to interview you today. My name is Raul Kavoru. I'm a junior at St. Paul School in New Hampshire, and I'm the president of CompanyRoots.
My name is Srish Jasti, and I'm a freshman at the Wharton School, and I'm from Homedale, New Jersey, and I'm the founder of CompanyRoots. The first question that we always ask are, and we know you don't have a company, but what are your company roots, and how do they help you in shaping your ideas and becoming the person you are today?
So my personal roots and how they inform what I'm doing.
Right.
That's such a great question. I think that more entrepreneurs should be asked that. So I love that that's how you start off, and I'm happy to try and address that. So my roots, I grew up in northwestern Canada, a city called Edmonton, and from a young age, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so I worked on starting a lot of different ventures throughout high school and my first couple years in undergrad at the University of Alberta. And raised some money, got some traction with stuff, but never scaled it to the point where we had an exit where I made significant money or really any money. But learned a lot doing that and enjoyed a lot of aspects of it. Concurrent with that, though, I ended up working with some co-founders who really just exemplified the worst in business. I'm not diagnosing anyone, but it wouldn't surprise me if they were sociopaths, right? They just really wanted to make money for the sake of making money, and they were really unconcerned about how that happened. They'd step on your neck if they thought it would get them ahead. And so based on that, I got a bad taste for traditional entrepreneurship. And this is not to say that there's anything wrong with trying to make a ton of money through entrepreneurship. But to be clear, I think that's a very fine goal. But it got me thinking about how could you use business for more than just generating profit. And so I found a mentor who passed away about 10 years ago now, but he was a wonderful resource for me. A gentleman named Gary McPherson, who overcame childhood polio, couldn't breathe on his own, lived in an institution until he was, I think, 45 years old, but then managed to start businesses, get married, have a family, and he started the Canadian Centre for Social Entrepreneurship. And so I learned a lot from him about how business could be a force for good in the world, and specifically how enterprise and innovation could be used to those ends.
Right.
So concurrent with that, I did a master's degree, and then I did my doctorate, and it was studying issues around social responsibility and social enterprise. And so I wrote my dissertation actually on nanotech startups, it sounds funny, but they're a hybrid organization. Nanotech startups have science and technology commercialization embedded in the core, which creates all sorts of friction. So it's a natural analogy to social enterprise, where there's financial and social goals in the core that create tensions and frictions that the founders need to deal with. After I graduated with my PhD, I got hired by Wharton and have been teaching entrepreneurship and researching social impact in business ever since. So those are my company roots.
Got it. Well, that's awesome. And on that note, the world of social impact and social enterprises is becoming more and more prominent in our society. So addressing new entrepreneurs who are looking to form these social enterprises, how would you recommend they find the balance in making profit while also doing social good?
I think there's no magic formula. It's going to be something where there's trade-offs and tensions. And I think the best thing that founders can do is just be mindful of these things. What makes me nervous is when I talk to a founder and they tell me that their impact scales with their profits, and that there's nothing that's going to cause attention or make this hard, right? And I hope that's true, but it's so rare to find a model where you can maximize on two things simultaneously, that it makes me nervous they're going to hit that point where they have to make decisions about, do we scale the company, do we try and make more money, or do we stay, keep fidelity to the social mission? And they're going to prioritize money. because that's the easy, directly in front of you quantifiable metric, and it gets rewarded by all sorts of really proximate stakeholders. Whereas impact, if you're not measuring it, it's kind of amorphous. It's unclear if your impact is good, bad, if it's growing, shrinking, and it's not rewarded in the same kind of way. So I think just being mindful that these trade-offs exist and have the potential to be things you need to grapple with is really important. And then I also think thinking really systematically through how you assess and manage your impact at a very early stage of creating a venture is super important, because what gets measured gets managed and attended to. And if you don't have that piece put in place, again, you just really run the risk that you're going to have a really well-intentioned venture that ends up drifting really far away from the original mission that you intended.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Being in a social venture with Rahul, those trade-offs have definitely confronted us, and they still tend to confront us. But I think just being exposed to it is a good thing to have. And I saw you conducted research which saw that corporations don't always follow through with their statements stating their social mission. So what was the process like in gathering this data, and what were your thoughts on the find?
Yeah, so is that the paper, the one you're talking about, the one where we looked at corporate reactions to COVID and the business roundtable?
I think this is the one, yeah, the business roundtable discussing like corporations like published a social statement, and they were asked later on if they were following it.
Yeah. So how do we gather data on that? So we put the sample together. First, we gathered data on just the 183 business roundtable signatories. And so we looked at the capital they returned to shareholders, their dividends historically, and then we got data from a third-party provider on social impact initiatives, which is actually tracked in a fairly granular way, which was really nice for what we were doing. We then expanded the data to look at every firm in the S&P 500, and we gathered all the same data on those companies as well, so that we could do a straight apples to apples comparison. So we could take a company that that had signed the business roundtable statement redefining the purpose of a corporation, match it with a company in the S&P 500 that looked just like it on as many indicators as we could match on, and then we looked at how they responded to COVID, right? And so the effects we're identifying was, did the one who signed it, the roundtable statement react any differently than the one who didn't sign the statement? And we found that, especially for companies that signed this declaration saying we're going to move away from shareholder capitalism, we're going to prioritize all stakeholders, that when COVID hit, they were the worst in terms of their responses. They responded slower, the responses were smaller. It was really just kind of discouraging.
Right. And what I'm seeing nowadays is the best people who are most successful are the ones who find that pain point and use it as an opportunity. And so you once stated an entrepreneurial mindset is about embracing a pain point as an opportunity to create novel and productive solutions. So can you elaborate on this idea behind this forward-thinking mindset?
Yeah, I didn't know I said that. You have to tell me where you found that quote. It sounds smart. Okay, so pain points and forward-looking opportunities, is that the question?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, so anytime there's a pain point in the world, there's an opportunity for an intervention that solves that. And if there's a market that will then pay to have that pain resolved, there's a business opportunity, right? And so some of these pain points, they don't have any sort of grander social implications, but some of them do, right? Mm-hmm. If people are upset about, the carbon footprint of the energy they consume, right? There's an opportunity, right? You have opportunities to generate clean power. If people, are upset about, exploitation in the supply chain of the sneakers they wear, right? There's an opportunity for someone to come in and, do it differently and create, an ethical brand, right? So lots of pain points that are out there in the world that beg for not just entrepreneurial solutions, but social entrepreneurial solutions.
Right. And that kind of brings me to your, what you teach in Wharton is entrepreneurship and also venture implementation. So do you have a personal favorite class? And if so, can you describe some of your personal experiences with your students regarding what you thought and maybe any of the ventures that they may have created from being exposed to your material?
That's a great question. So I teach undergrads, MBAs, and executive MBAs, both the intro class as well as the venture implementation class. And I enjoy them all, I think for slightly different reasons. The undergrads are great because, you know, they're earnest and ambitious and creative, and they come up with wonderful ideas and they do really good work. The downside of the undergrads is, you know, there's very strong pressures at Wharton to go into finance or consulting. And so, you know, I get exposed to all these great ideas that these really smart, ambitious people have. And then they go to on-campus recruiting and they, you know, they don't work on entrepreneurship. They go and live in New York and, you know, like who could blame them, right? I would have done the same thing. If I could eat ramen noodles and work on my venture or go make, you know, 120 grand a year and, you know, hang out in New York with my friends, yeah, of course I'd do that. The MBAs, you know, they can be a handful sometimes, but they're generally, you know, worldly, have, you know, well-refined ideas, and, you know, they respond well to the material. And the ones who are serious about actually starting ventures, you know, you can really work with them and help them realize their vision. So I've had the privilege to, you know, help advise a number of different startups that have come out of Penn. Some that started, you know, in my class or that intersected with one of my classes. And then, you know, I stayed in touch with the founders and have been watching them do really wonderful things since. And then the executives, I really like because they're sort of like me, right? They're all about my age, you know, mid-career, you know, all of our cultural references are the same. So, you know, I have a higher hit rate on my jokes with that crowd. But I've yet to see a venture come out of one of those classes and succeed. It's just, I mean, it's a high bar when you have, you know, like a family and a mortgage and car payments to, you know, pull the plug on that to start an venture.
Yeah, definitely.
In one specific situation, when you were helping 3 Wharton students behind Chicago Furniture Bank, what were some of the problems and discussions like at the start of the project?
Oh, they were so awesome. They're, yeah, 3 of my favorites. Smart, ambitious, you know, socially conscious, really just wonderful people. And I've been so impressed with what they've done. And just for background, for anyone who's listening or reading and doesn't know, they won the President's Engagement Prize, which is a very prestigious prize at Penn, where you get a nice chunk of money to, you know, really grow the organization you're starting and then pay yourself a salary. But to your question, and it's a great question, the biggest challenge working with them was they were trying to do too much at the start. They thought that the only way to make impact was to just overturn the apple cart and come up with a whole new model for how a furniture bank would work. And so they're twisting themselves into knots, trying to reinvent the wheel when it really didn't need to be reinvented, right? What it needed was a little bit of, you know, light tweaking and then an injection of efficiency, which were things that they were equipped to provide. And so getting them to work through the process, because if you just tell people that they're, you know, barking down the wrong path, is that even a metaphor? But if they're, you know, if they're going down the wrong path, you know, it can come off as trying to, you know, like rain on their parade a little bit, right? So you have to like coach them through. And so getting them to see that the value in what they're doing wasn't so much in recreating the way a furniture bank worked, but taking a model that existed and tailoring it for a context where there was a need. That was the challenge. And it wasn't a big challenge. They got it fairly fast, and they've done an amazing job on implementation.
That's awesome to hear. So what do you think is very special about the management department at Wharton, and what fields do the management concentration alums come out as, and how do you believe taking your coursework has impacted them to maybe do something different?
Oh, that's a great question. So, I mean, what makes management department special at Wharton? I mean, if we're being honest, probably not much. You know, like you could, you know, close your eyes, spin around 3 times and, you know, replace our faculty with the Stanford, MIT, HBS, Columbia, Yale, Michigan faculty, and it'd be the same kind of thing, right? Like, smart people working hard, trying to, do research that does some good in the world. I mean, I think what sets us apart, though, is the size of our department. We're huge. The management department's the size of some other entire business schools.
Wow.
So you get a critical mass of people doing a lot of different things. And that translates, I think, well into the course offerings, too. I mean, there's just an incredible breadth that you can take. Then in terms of what I think people have benefited from taking my class, I mean, I hope just getting a sense about, entrepreneurship is something that's not this mystical process that, takes, special people or special insight to go through, but it's something that's really accessible to anyone. And it's really just a matter of putting the work in. So I hope they take that. And then, for anyone I've worked with who's trying to do something on the social side, I hope I've helped them to see how that can be an intrinsically valuable piece of what they're doing, and how that can fit under the umbrella of a financially sustainable venture.
Right.
And so right now in the world, obviously, with COVID-19, why and how should corporations and firms really play a positive role in helping the economy to recover?
Well, I mean, there's two reasons. One's the moral imperative, right? Like, it's just the right thing to do. Profiteering off suffering is sort of a shitty thing to do. And so, these organizations have the resources to respond, right? The other is, I mean, from an instrumental point of view, it's good business for them to try and do things that are going to get the economy back up and running. Supporting their employees, supporting society. I mean, the faster everything gets back to normal, the faster, their businesses get back to normal, right? And so especially in, sectors that have been hard hit by this, I mean, they have a real incentive to try and, do what they can to help out and get things back to normal. The third one is that, people have long memories, and companies that didn't step up and do something when there's this huge collective crisis, I mean, people will remember that. It's not going to be a good look, right? Like, for companies who just, battened down the hatches, furloughed and laid off employees, didn't contribute to producing, pandemic-related goods, or even worse, I mean, profiteered off this. I mean, it's just not good long-term business, right? Like, there's a huge reputational risk in doing stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
That makes sense. And so one of the last questions that we always ask in the interview is, what advice would you give to the current and next generation of high school and college students that would like to start the process to make a positive impact on society? And how do you recommend they start this process?
That's a great question. So the first thing I'd recommend is just educating themselves on the space. Getting a sense about what a social enterprise is, what a socially responsible business is, and then what both sides of the debate are around, are these things good, are they bad, where can they work, and where might they not? So, the more you can learn, the stronger your foundation is going to be when it comes time to actually, enact this knowledge. The other thing I'd suggest is finding like-minded people and just having conversations. So, a lot of good comes out of smart, ambitious young people just talking about areas of common interest, right? So this could be, discussing, social issues. This could be discussing business. This could be trying to generate ideas to help and do things, around issues that you care about. But just, building that community, right? No one whistles a symphony. It's kind of like a silly saying, but it's true, right? Like, if you want to do something important and do something that's going to help society, you're going to need people, right? So, find your tribe, find the people who are going to be your support system, and just be involved, both at an academic level as well as a practical level, and trying to take, small steps to do this stuff.
Yeah,
definitely. Thank you for letting us interview you today. And
yeah.
It was an honor and privilege speaking with you.